Aloha, and welcome to An Oral History, The Life of Speaker Say. Last time we went over college and early adult years, and this segment we're going to go over life as a legislator. I'm your host, Dina Poma Barnes, and thank you for viewing. And thank you, Speaker, for sharing today.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this discussion about my oral history as far as the history of Calvin Say here in the state legislature.
Okay, well, let's start off with how many years you've been a legislature and why you stayed in so long.
Well, let me start off by saying, in response to your question, it's been 37 years, 19 terms in the State House of Representatives. I was elected in 1976, and from 1976 till today, I've been representing the district that I grew up in. I've been very privileged to have been in the State House of Representatives, and I want to thank, before I continue on, to thank the residents and the voters of the district that I do represent all these years. I can still recall in 1976 when I first got elected, it was a multi-member district with two members of the House of Representatives, and that made it much more easier. And that's where I decided to let the senior member choose his or her committee assignments. At that point in time, it was Representative Ted Morioka, who has since passed away, but he was given the opportunity of where he wanted to sit, whereby he sat on the Finance Committee and the Waterland bracket. Well, I decided to stay in the education bracket because of my background, and also in the labor bracket and transportation.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your constituents, the demographic nature? And
Well, in the 1970s, it was a very young community, where all of us, as far as youngsters that were growing up in the Valley, St. Louis Heights, and Willamette Rise, went to the same public schools and then high schools. It was a district that I'm very proud of. Why? People will forget that in Pololo Valley, we had an area called Veterans Village. That's where the 442nd and the 100 Infantry soldiers came back home and decided to reside there. And that was the area known as Kupa'a Drive, Ua Drive, and Maui Place, where a lot of my classmates' fathers were in the 100 Infantry or the 442nd.
Can you talk a little bit more about those? They have some significance to those military units.
Yes, after World War II, when they did come back, they had to find a place where they could reside in, and somehow they chose that area, which is then called Veterans Village. From the Nakayama family to the Oshita family to Okuma family to a lot of the different families whose fathers came back and decided to reside in Pololo. And that's how I got to know a lot of them. And their contribution to the state of Hawaii and to America, I'm very, very so proud of what they have done for the people of the state of Hawaii and the Japanese, community here in the state.
And how do you, today, keep up with the issues that your constituents are concerned about, or get to really know your constituents?
That's a very good question, and let me say this, Dina. Right now, presently, every month, I try to attend at least 5 meetings in the evenings. I have 3 neighborhood boards that I have to attend to, which is the Pololo Neighborhood Board, the St. Louis Heights Diamond Head Kapahulu Neighborhood Board, and the Kamiki Neighborhood Board. I also have the St. Louis Heights Community Association, and last night we had the Pololo Community Council meeting for the Pololo Valley residents. So those are 5 in the evenings. Other ways I get to know what the pulse of the community is like, I like to walk in the afternoons on the weekends. Not going house to house per se, but getting my exercise from my home on 10th Avenue, walking down to Waialae, from Waialae maybe down to 6th Avenue and coming back up. Then I would go down Pololo Valley and walk around. As I'm walking around, I'm getting to talk to residents who are out in their yard, lawn mowing the yard, raking the leaves, etc., and just chit-chatting about how things are and what they're doing, and etc. And that's how I try to get the pulse. And in other ways, I do attend our public schools to meet with the principals and the vice principals and the faculty, and try to attend some of the functions that they have for their respective schools.
Okay. And how has your district changed over the years?
The district has changed tremendously because as a young community 38 years ago, it's becoming a much more aging community where, today both my parents, my mother and father, have passed away. My neighbors have passed away, the Takahashi family and other families, the Yamashitas, etc. And what I'm getting to see is that from a nuclear family, a community that was really family oriented, is evolving into more of a transitional. More and more renters are moving into the homes where our family friends from the district have since passed away, where the children are not coming back, which are my classmates, but they are renting it out to renters. So that's been a major influx. But I also must say that there's been a lot of changes in regards to the demolition and tearing down of old homes and replacing it with new homes, with new families also.
That's good.
Yeah.
So this circle of life.
Yes,
kind of
the
happening
cycle
there.
of life, right? And you know, I must be very candid and honest, is that if there's one thing I'd like to get across this morning, it's the fact of the matter that, hey, for all my family and friends out there, you know, residents in the district, please send your children to Palolo Elementary School. Please send them to Jarrett Middle School and on to Kaimiki High School. They're great public educational institutions.
Great. Does it get any easier?
Oh,
the years go
oh
by?
yeah. It gets much more difficult because as I walk the district, even during the campaign period, it's much more difficult because I'm talking more. I'm talking like how I'm sharing my thoughts and my views of my career with the residents, and we're talking about, you know, pocketbook issues. Calvin, what's wrong with you folks, man? Raising the water fees, the sewer fees. What's wrong with you folks? You know, doing this and doing that. I don't support rail. Da 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 da. That's what I enjoy talking stories about, and issues that we are facing here today at the state legislature.
Okay, let's move on to some of the chairmanships
Yes.
that you've had through the years.
Yes.
Would you list those sequentially and maybe talk a little bit about? We'll go into some of the
Okay.
contentious issues that you might have had
Yes.
decisions on.
I'll try my best. And for the first 4 years of my career, I was appointed the chair of the Committee on Culture and the Arts, and that particular committee dealt with one of the major accomplishments that took 29 years, and that was the return of Kaho'olawe, to stop the bombing of Kaho'olawe in the mid-70s. After 4 years as a chair of Culture and the Arts, I then moved on to the chair of Tourism, where I was very privileged to have met individuals like Mr. Ken Char, who was with Aloha Airlines, which is no longer in operation. But Mr. Char became the president of the Hawaii Visitors Bureau, where we opened up the Japan market here in the state of Hawaii, where you had the group tours that came to Hawaii on buses. And today, you know, most of them, as far as the Japanese visitors, are what we call the FIT, Free Independent Travelers. We opened up that particular area of Asia, which is Japan. And then I also learned a lot about marketing and promotion and advertising, because Mr. Char took my vice chair and I, Representative Dennis Nakasato, to New York. We got to see the travel agencies in New York. We got to talk to the general managers or regional directors of BOAC, British Overseas Air. I don't know if it's in existence today. He took us to where? The Gourmet magazine. Why? He had the foresight in seeing that we get our Hawaiian fruits and produce in the magazine to market Hawaii from a food set, you know. And I think you can see that today with a lot of the cable televisions, where you have the Food Network stations that highlight different resorts or different cities of bizarre foods and etc. That's where Mr. Char really gave us the opportunity to experience what it is to market and promote Hawaii. One of the highlights of visiting New York was to promote Hawaii with the what is it? The not King Kamehameha Day parade, but the other Aloha Week parade and the court. They were there in Madison Square Garden promoting Hawaii. And one final thing that I got to really appreciate in those days, and I think Dina, you're much younger than me, was have you heard of Studio 54?
I heard of it, yes.
And that's where it was the disco, John Travolta and so forth. That was where it was a highlight for me, visiting Studio 54 and what it was like compared to what we have in Hawaii.
Wow. Can you go a little bit more into what being a chairman means, what type of roles and responsibilities you have?
Oh, there's a lot as a chair. First and foremost, a chair of a particular committee is in charge of a program area of the state of Hawaii. As an example, if I was the vice chair of education, the chair would be in charge of the Department of Education's budget, what they have requested this year as a biennium budget, and secondly, what you can approve or disapprove with that request, budget requests. From that point of view, you address the budget of that particular program or department, and then you also have to address proposed legislation that your colleagues have introduced relating to education, instructional hours, after-school programs, all of these types. It goes through the committee. What I've done as a chair is that when I have these measures that are referred to the Committee on Education, we then have the vice chair come in and we discuss the bills as far as which bills you would like to consider hearing. That is the process. And once we decide what bills to schedule for a hearing, then it is heard, and that's where it's vetted and dialogued with the community at large along with the departments.
Is there anything that the public can do to ensure that their bill is heard, or?
Well, the best approach is that if you have a specific bill, what they should do is come on down to talk to the chair on a personal basis, and that way the chairperson of the committee will understand why this particular bill was introduced by Calvin Say at the request of one of the constituents. From that point, that would be much more easier rather than just emailing or calling the person up. Another advice I could share with you, Dina, in regards to getting these particular measures heard is that during the interim, the bills are alive for 2 years. So for this year, 2013 and 2014, the bills that you and I have introduced is still live if it's not heard this year. What I would recommend is that during the interim period from June till November and December, before the session begins in January, go and meet with the elected official to talk story about how important this bill is as far as the interest groups that you folks represent.
Now, it's also my understanding that the legislature is a part-time legislature, so
Yes, we
are all the legislators here during the summer, or do people have to get a schedule of their particular legislator, or how's that done?
How is that done? It is done upon each of the individual legislators. I come in every day, maybe 2-3 hours, because I want to know what my correspondence is, what my emails are, what my telephone calls are, so that I can respond to the concerns of the residents or to different groups that want to meet with me. Personally, from the 1970s to today, we have grown in much more responsibilities as an elected official. So it makes it very difficult even to find a part-time job. A part-time job was something like what I would do when I first started off. And for those who saw the second recording, that I worked as a busboy Friday, Saturday, Sundays, on the weekends. And that was just to supplement my $12,000 income for the year. Other members are basically full-time. Others are attorneys who have their law practices that they have retained clients. And some of them, are just basic small business persons here in the state of Hawaii. But overall, it's been very difficult to sustain ourselves if you are a full-time legislator. And when I was a Speaker of the House, it was basically full-time, 6-7 hours, and then I would go back to Kotake to do my business for 3-4 hours. And what is it like? Well, during the session, I think most of us are here about 8 to 10 hours. And in my particular case, if I have anything at the business that I operate and run, the staff would call me up if there's a decision that has to be made. But overall, you've got the gamut of members of the House and Senate representing different interest groups throughout the community and the economy. And that's why I think the delegates at the 78 Con continued on to say that we should be a part-time legislature, so that you would have all different views of individuals coming from different sectors of our economy and our community in representing the different interests. If you were to go to a full-time legislative route, the knowledge would be very limited because you can't take any jobs. But it's also a point that the Salary Commission talked about in reference to, if you do a full-time legislature, there is no conflict of interest, right? Representing the auto industry, representing the pharmaceutical industry, representing the hotel industry, members will not be able to work. They'll just be a full-time legislature in that period.
Is there a occupation or job that kind of takes the majority of the legislative positions, or are there a lot of lawyers or teachers that become legislators?
Okay, that's a very excellent question. Most of them, I would say maybe about half of our members of the House are attorneys. So they're very fortunate to go back to their law firms and pick up the pieces as far as for the next 5 to 6 months before we go back into session. Then you have insurance agents, you have real estate brokers and salespersons, and you got some small business people like myself and Representative Yamashita, and then you have state retirees also that are in the House of Representatives. It's very difficult to go into teaching if that was an occupation that you got your degree in, because your teaching would be conflicting with your session, right? Can you do summer school? You could in the private schools, but you can't do it in the public schools because you cannot have 2 state paychecks at a particular point in time.
What about professors? Is that also considered 2 state?
No, because some of our colleagues do teach at Hawaii Pacific University.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's basically 1 or 2 courses, and at that point, that's how they're trying to supplement their income as far as taking care of their families.
Okay. Okay. Just going back to chairmanships, how is a chairman chosen?
A chairman is chosen by his leadership team, and it's up to the leadership team and the caucus to determine who they would like to see. But in most cases, it's basically the speaker, the majority leader, the majority floor leader, and the vice speaker that makes that decision. Other times, there'll be issues whereby horse trading for organizational purposes, offering a committee chairmanship in exchange for his or her vote. That approach I've never taken. I've always said you should always try to get the 26 to 28 of the majority, and then have the 26 to 28 decide what assignments they would like to have.
So they do, when you were speaker, you had a wish list per se of what people would like to chair. Okay.
And in most cases, if you were the chair of the Consumer Protection Committee for 6 years, I would hope that you would want to continue on, because you would know the issues of that particular program area, of consumer protection areas, commerce, etc., right? Rather than having a new person trying to pick up the pieces where you left off. And that's where I shared with a lot of the freshmen too, that if there's one request that I make every other year when we're elected and they are freshmen, that please, think about sacrificing 10 years of your personal private life for public office, because it takes us at least 4 to 6 years to learn the total budget of state government. It takes us 4 to 6 years to learn about all the different issues that are pending before us. And like I said to a group 5 or 6 years ago, which I was highly criticized, any legislation that is controversial, Dina, will take about 5 to 7 years to be adopted. Why? You have to educate the members of the House and Senate on that particular controversial issue. It's not as simple as what people may say, introduce it this year, we'll get it done this year. No, because you want to vet the issue of the pros and the cons. Those who oppose it, those who support it. And when you get to see the 2 sides, and can you come up with a compromise, which politics is the art of compromise, that's where both sides will not be happy with a compromise, because they're looking at their point of view and his or her point of view, the extremes. And that's where compromises come in. And that's where, for the general public, that is what we call our conference drafts. You get the House position, you get the Senate position, they go into conference, and they come up with a conference draft. That is politics, the art of compromise.
Does the legislature ever use mediators or negotiators?
No. Okay. We've never done that. I've never done that throughout my career, because the mediator or the arbitrator or the mentor or whoever it is basically the president and the speaker. They will mediate problems that are occurring in conference with the conferees of the two chambers, the House and the Senate. They will be mediating problems that we have between the chair and vice chairs of our respective committees. So we don't hire any mediator or arbitrator. It is the speaker and the president that works it out with their leadership team, with the committee chairs and the vice chairs or their members.
Okay. And you had quite a few years to do that.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your speakership when you were Speaker of the House here?
I've really enjoyed it, because when I took over as a speaker, what I tried to do was delegate as much responsibilities to the committee chairs and the vice chairs. I wasn't the person that would, grab everything and then say do this or do that. I will leave it up to the chairs to decide. But at the end of the day, if the chairs and the vice chairs and the committee members do not want to address a particular issue, or they want to hide behind the issue, they could always use the Speaker of the House to be that buffer. And sometimes I have done, things that the public may be upset about, but it is at the request of the members. It is not at the request of Calvin Say. Think about it. And that's why, it's a damn if you do, damn if you don't. But I've really enjoyed myself being a speaker because I took the approach of being a speaker as an educator. Educate the members to the best of their ability to make that final educated formal decision on each of the different issues or policies that we have before us. And that's the approach I've always taken, and I'm enjoying it, really, as far as the past, 14 years as a speaker. Other than that, no, there's no regrets. I'm just happy that a lot of the members who were part of the House, who went through the years that I was speaker, I'm just happy that they're all doing very well. I do miss a lot of the members who have retired or moved on to higher office. And that's where, for the public, I'm very much concerned about the elections, that every other year we have about a 25 to 30% turnover, meaning members of the House are leaving for higher office, members of the House are retiring, members of the House have lost their election. 30% or 25%, or 1/4. You've got to educate these new members on all the issues that are before us.
Can you talk about how the election to Speaker of the House in the House of Representatives of Hawaii, how that's run?
The election of the Speaker of the House is basically counting the votes that if you have 26 of the majority caucus, you're the Speaker.
So for the 14 years that you were Speaker, which is the longest time anybody has held that position, every 7 years, so every 2 terms,
every 2 terms.
A new election
Every other year
comes
yes,
about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm up every other year if I was, continuing on as a speaker. But it's a very tough job. It's a very demanding job because you're there to support your members. You're there to think about the greater good of the people of the state of Hawaii. And sometimes, you have these vocal minority groups that can persuade members versus the silent majority. The mom and pops, our retirees, our infants and our children, our public school students, all of this, weighs on one's shoulder. That, I don't want to raise taxes on my seniors because they're on a fixed income, right? But I also want to finance, pre-education or pre-K education, which the governor has proposed because, from the age of 3 to 5 is the most critical point in educating a child. And I'm happy to say that we do have a program in Pololo Valley, which is Head Start. See? And that's been in operation for almost 20 plus years, which I'm very, very happy. But I am concerned this morning and concerned about the cuts that will happen on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. So as I look back and I reflect, I've enjoyed it. Yes, I may have a lot of scars. I may have, a lot of bullet holes. But in the end, if your heart is there in the right position in helping people, a greater majority, that is the goal. And I think for all of us in public office who have run for public office, their intentions are very noble, very honest, and very truthful.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. We have time for one quick question.
Yes.
You were also part of another organization. It was the Conference of State Legislatures. Will you tell us a little bit about that? Just what that organization is?
Okay. The organization is known as the State Legislative Leaders Foundation. It is made up of the leaders of all 50 states and the territories. And I was very privileged that when I became Speaker, we also had a group or organization called the National Speakers Conference. And in 1999, they had appointed me to be the second vice president for the organization because they wanted to come to Hawaii to have the conference. But in 2003, we had the Speakers Conference here in Hawaii, which was an excellent venue for the speakers throughout the country to visit Hawaii. It's hard to believe that a lot of them did not come visit Hawaii, and there was about maybe 6 or 7 that visited Hawaii, and they were recollecting or reflecting and recollecting their experience here, and that was World War II, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So we got to visit the Arizona Memorial, We had a nice reception at the Mighty Mole, which is the Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
I was very privileged to have our, is it what you call the General Shinseki with the Veterans Affairs Committee. He
Mm-hmm.
gave a speech. The speakers were intrigued with the Pacific Command up at Camp Smith, and we did a lot of work. You know, people think it's all play, but no, it's a lot of work in trying to explain to them how important the Department of Defense is here in Hawaii, how important tourism is for Hawaii, and the people of Hawaii. Getting to know the people of Hawaii was a major part of it, and that's where I was really pleased that they got to appreciate the Hawaiian culture and the people that they met here in Hawaii.
Great. Well, I'm sure the legislators that did come probably enjoyed themselves.
Yes, they did, because some of them were their first time, their first and only time to come to Hawaii, and to and to have that opportunity is fantastic. It's just like me, Dina. When I first became speaker, the first speakers conference was in San Antonio, Texas, and when I went to walk around the Alamo, I was shocked. It's such a small fort, right? And it's just a facade. I got to walk the river walk where they did major, renovations to the river. But, these are things that I'm just appreciative and thankful that the people of the state of Hawaii, the people of the district, have given me the opportunity of experiencing what I call American history.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Speaker.
You're welcome.
And thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll join us next time where we're going to go over some contemporary issues here in the city, state, and some national, sometimes contentious issues. Thank you for joining us. Mahalo. See you next time.